All right, hello, my name is Alex. Today we're going to be talking about operational security for human rights defenders. So why do human rights defenders need physical security? Well, there's a narrowing digital and physical divide, meaning our physical lives are more and more tied to our digital ones. And being able to surveil the digital life is basically the same as being able to surveil the physical one because of how tightly they're coupled. HRDs need privacy because they deal with people that are often at odds with local governments, national governments, and are there to kind of normally set kind of or work within international norms that might not be well respected locally. So privacy is essential to protect these organizations. While government surveillance is outpacing privacy reforms, law enforcement and political groups may be investigating political movements preemptively. And in these cases, groups that work with them may be kind of sucked into an investigation, brought into legal proceedings, or investigated in ways that make them or members of their organization feel uncomfortable. So this becomes a problem because you end up having issues with retaining people within your organization or with recruiting new members, just because there might be a stigma around joining your group. Protecting member privacy is essential for this reason. Some people are kind of concerned about joining groups that have social impacts because they don't want to have basically their professional lives compromised, or to deal with any type of legal issues. So during this presentation, we're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at basically the perspective of law enforcement agencies, and kind of how they look at organizations and determine whether these are civil rights groups or whether they are groups that are at odds with the government and kind of fall into the category of some kind of insurgency. Because there's a lot of gray area here, there are many cases where journalists, human rights defender organizations end up being categorized by law enforcement as some type of insurgent political movement or something dangerous. And oftentimes those classifications kind of pass away with time because these movements become something of a political norm. But for the moments that they do come under the scrutiny of law enforcement, group members may feel very uncomfortable operating normally, contacting new people, and may feel that they put other people at risk by operating normally. So we'll take a couple views here. We'll look at this from the perspective of law enforcement. We'll look at this from the perspective of the human rights organization. And we'll do that so that the human rights organizations can see kind of how it is that they're seen by law enforcement and can try to avoid acting in ways that might trigger their suspicions. So we're going to take a look at some technologies that are available, as well as some practices which are available to law enforcement that they'll be using to evaluate and identify risks to themselves, which may kind of unwittingly be generated by the human rights organization. And we'll try to find ways to avoid doing those things so we don't come under unnecessary scrutiny. So we're going to take a look at a couple technologies right now. The first one is going to be gray shift. Let's just see what these capabilities are.
Gray key helped in this case because it was able to access the device. It was the only software available that would get the passcode and also extract the data from the device. We had pictures and videos of the suspect, pictures of and videos of some of the property that was taken from inside the house and some injuries. We were also able to get some chat messages between him and people talking about the crime. I would recommend Gray Key to other agencies, and the reason I would is because I feel like every agency should have a digital forensics examiner, whether they're small, whether they're medium-sized, large. All these crimes that are being committed, the majority of them have a digital aspect, and the value of having digital evidence in a case is to have the whole picture of the crime.
Okay, and now let's take a look at how human rights organizations might fall under the scrutiny of law enforcement because they have similar qualities to unlawful social movements or insurgencies, something like that, from the perspective of law enforcement, and how those kind of misperceptions by law enforcement might lead to detrimental effects to the human rights organization.
Fallout coming quickly. Police Chief Jerry Williams taking a one-day suspension. 3 assistant chiefs demoted, and several officers referred to the Arizona Attorney General's office for criminal investigation.
This all started October 17th when a group of protesters in downtown Phoenix were arrested and charged as a criminal street gang. Today's report confirming what ABC 15 told you in February. Officers knowingly lied to a grand jury, making up claims these protesters were as dangerous as the Bloods and the Crips, and also found prosecutors, assistant chiefs, even the FBI were part of the plan.
Okay, now that we've taken a look from the law enforcement perspective of kind of see things a little bit how they see it, and we'll come back to that with a few other observations from their end, let's take a look at how we can protect the human network. So we'll take a look at cellular network theory, the use of cutouts, passive and active methods of cutouts, counter surveillance, and how kind of the lack of awareness of cellular network theory may create challenges to recruiting, training, and collaborating with outside individuals or organizations. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with keeping secrets. Many organizations keep secrets and they're perfectly lawful. So Pepsi has a secret recipe. KFC has their secret chicken recipe. WD-40 is a trade secret, and AutoTune is a trade secret. So those are all secrets. They help the organizations run with a competitive advantage, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everyone has the right to privacy. And so basically, cellular network theory is kind of like looking at digital networks and how we maintain the privacy of those local digital networks, but in a human context. So how are connections made between individuals while maintaining privacy and these kind of trade secrets of the organization, as well as not putting people at risk for having an association with the organization when they might live in a political context where communication with outside entities might be seen as suspicious or bring unnecessary scrutiny. So cellular networks, just like digital networks, should maintain levels of network segmentation. And so in digital networks, we use firewalls, but in human networks, we use something called cutouts. And these are segments to the human network that basically try to ensure privacy, kind of promote a lack of traceability through these communication channels, so that if an individual is discovered or comes under suspicion, they're not easily, their communications are not easily traced back to different sources within the network. In the same way that we would segment a physical network to prevent a hacker from gaining access to one device and then making subsequent connections or lateral movements within the network. So let's listen to Cory Doctorow, who's a famous journalist and a privacy advocate, and just hear his perspective on why privacy is important for human rights defenders and, in his case, for journalists working with human sources.
Hi, I'm Cory Doctorow, and I write science fiction novels. I work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I co-own a website called Boing Boing, and I write for The Guardian. We've just done a panel on protecting sources and privacy when you're reporting stories. I think the first thing to think about is planning ahead. So anticipating that at some point in the future, you may do something, you may have to become very private in the way that you conduct your daily affairs to protect a source. And that if you suddenly have a break in your pattern that says all of a sudden you started using encryption in your email and you started turning off your phone and you started doing all kinds of things, that in itself, if the adversary that you're thinking about is like a government adversary, if you're dealing with the next Edward Snowden, those patterns themselves are very obvious. So you can fix that by adopting good password and privacy hygiene now.
So to kind of give some working examples of passive and active cutouts, let's imagine that there's an individual in this cell, which we're basically going to call different segments of the human network. So we have cell 1 and cell 1A. So cell 1 needs to communicate to cell 1A, and they want to ensure that communication between them doesn't, or if there's an observation of one of these members, it doesn't lead to the discovery of another member, because that member might be, say, a whistleblower, someone that works in some type of environment where association with this group would be frowned upon, could lead to negative professional impacts, could lead to unnecessary scrutiny from law enforcement. So basically, they need to find a method to communicate, and that method is called a cutout. And so passive cutout are basically the use of individuals to pass information between these different cells. And so one example of this might be, let's say, cell 1A regularly goes by this gas station on their way to work every morning. And they just have the normal habit of picking up a coffee there and whatever else they might need. So something they could start doing is there could be some type of prearrangement where the cutout basically puts some information on a USB stick in a Juul like e-cigarette cartridge, and cell 1A could end up buying that. Of course, there's some type of pre-existing relationship here between the cutout and someone else in the organization that might not be cell 1 or cell 1A. You know, you can imagine this might also be like a bookstore or some kind of other type of shop where you pick up little knickknacks, whatever it might be. But basically, the going to this place for cell 1A is not a suspicious activity, and it's something that happens on a very regular basis. And so they can pick up that Juul e-cigarette, which is actually a USB stick with some information on it. That information can be encrypted, and that information can be decrypted using, say, an ad which is posted on Craigslist that no one will ever buy from, but which has perhaps an image with a stenographically applied secret, or maybe something in the text has some pre-existing, some type of message which is decipherable with the one-time pad that was distributed earlier. But this would be an example of an active cutout. So that's a way to kind of, you know, you think about like a journalist who needs to protect a source, or like I said with the examples earlier, what the situation might be. So an active cutout is going to be the use of not individuals and these kind of like drop points, but actually some type of communication signal, like a radio wave or some type of digital signal, or like you could kind of think in the previous example that there were two components there, the passive cutout being the individual at the shop who packages the Juul cigarettes, and the active component would be the Craigslist ad. In the case of an active cutout, this is something like, okay, everyone in our organization communicates over encrypted messaging. So that's active cutout. That's a little bit less complicated, but a little more easy to compromise. If someone, say, discovers the frequency of the radio transmission, or discovers like the Signal group chat, or a device is compromised and someone gets access and therefore has access to the Signal group chats, that's an active cutout, and they're a little bit less resistant. I mean, both have kind of pluses and minuses, but I guess active cutouts, you could say, are a little bit less resistant to observation and compromise. So another thing to consider, that although you take measures to maintain cutouts and the secrecy of your members, and kind of hope to maintain regular normal operation of your organization without too much interference from law enforcement, in the sense of individuals being harassed or arrested or investigated or just made to feel uncomfortable, there are other ways that law enforcement and government agencies disrupt networks for the purpose of kind of destabilizing what they might view as an insurgency or some type of political movement that's running counter to the kind of hoped for kind of political environment that a human rights defender might come up against. So yeah, this is basically the government tries to disrupt a network through kind of a denial of service, if we were to use a digital analogy. So human rights organizations, news organizations, groups that kind of do protests, they're made up of nodes just like a network are. and communication has to flow through them. They need to have an environment that's suitable to operate in. You know, it's kind of like thinking about a network devices need the bandwidth to communicate. They need electricity. They need a kind of, if you have physical hardware, a kind of normal temperature room to operate. You need to have different items on that, or different devices on that network interconnected, and they need to operate together for the network to operate in a way that keeps the organization running smoothly. So the human components of that are similar. And if you look at kind of the way that an organization might be disrupted from a human perspective, basically, let's take an example here to not completely destroy, but to degrade the organization. So if you know, for example, that a protest group wants to get news coverage in order to kind of draw attention to their movement, and you're some type of authoritarian regime, you might prevent news coverage of protests via your leverage in like state media, for example. And so even though you can't target the organizers of the protest through surveillance or through kind of intimidation, you can degrade their ability to operate and gain awareness of their movement by making those protests uncoverable by the media. Similarly, if some type of student group is trying to raise awareness for some type of social cause on their campuses, you could outlaw or basically outlaw the distribution of flyers on campus to prevent that message from getting out. And so those are ways you can disrupt the overall system. I mean, if a government is kind of aware of the general aims of a movement, human rights defenders or journalists, they can put enough friction in the way to degrade the performance of those organizations in such a way that it makes it very difficult for them to operate and to do what they intend to do without targeting individuals specifically who they're unable to find because they've properly masked their communications and maintained a level of privacy that makes it difficult for them to find. So again, now taking a look at public gatherings and travel security. Here we're going to take a look at how kind of physical surveillance and a bit of crossover between physical and digital surveillance can lead to the compromise of individuals and groups that gather in kind of in protests or in group settings. And it also gives us an idea of how kind of groups that run against human rights defender groups might view them and evaluate them and try to keep track of them. So in this example, we see two protesters being arrested, and they've been compromised. But the problem is that they've also compromised others by having their digital devices potentially captured in these cases. And so, if those devices aren't password protected, all of their activities up to that point, the people they've come into contact with, those are all also being compromised at the same moment. So in group gatherings, there are a few things to pay attention to, which are kind of markings, identifying features that make people more noticeable, easier to surveil. For example, in the Hong Kong protests, a lot of people caught kind of awareness of how law enforcement was tracking individuals after the protests, and they developed methods to basically change clothes as they kind of moved from location to location. They would have like individuals purchase train tickets, I think with cash, so that no one would be tracked with their credit card, and kind of distribute those tickets to move people from location to location. But yeah, so there's a lot of kind of digital and physical information which gets left behind with people moving to and from these group gatherings, as well as people that infiltrate the organizations and kind of just listen passively to what's going on around them, kind of see how people interact together, who's in charge, who does what, kind of just learn more about the organization. And this might not be too much of a big deal for many organizations, but if you're dealing with people that want to remain anonymous or need to remain anonymous for professional or for other reasons, this can become a problem. Also, again, going back to how the physical and digital divide are kind of tightly coupled, gathering in groups leads to association of kind of digital fingerprints of individual members. And one example of how this happens is during protests or during gatherings or when a location becomes suspected of being a gathering point, either the cellular network or the local area network can be monitored to determine which devices have connected, and those devices can easily be associated with individuals through ad tracking data that's readily accessible through secondary through data brokers. And let's see just an example of how this took place during the BLM movements, and we'll listen to a professional speak about how associations are made during these social gatherings.
What you can do to make sure that either police or maybe some more, nuisance organizations, aren't tracking you or aren't following you. Is that one thing to be concerned about? Like, is that a realistic concern that you've noticed or that is actually happening? And then two, if so, what can some of these, protesters or folks who are taking to the streets and want to keep their information safe and don't want folks knocking down their door, what can they do?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a real issue. If you've been to, the protest here in New York, you know that it's not uncommon to suddenly have helicopters floating above the crowd. Those helicopters are most likely there to vacuum up all the cell phones that are below them. So the first thing you can do is turn your cell phone off, put it in airplane mode and turn the Wi-Fi off. You cannot bring it. There's pros and cons to that, obviously. But if it is on and connected to the networks, both the cell phone company knows where you are and the police can, request that data either about you or they can request everyone that was in this area. And secondly, they use things called stingrays, which is probably what's in the helicopter, that pretend they're a cell phone tower. So your phone's looking for towers. The police device gets hit by your phone saying, "Are you a tower?" And they now know that you were there. So the number one thing, if you want to go to a protest and not have a lot of people, including the police, know you were there, and you might be near something bad that happens, and they will come later and ask you about it, even if you weren't the perpetrator or didn't cause it. So I would say you don't want them to know, you don't want to be on these lists.
So when he says you don't want to be on these lists, let's see exactly what he's talking about. How could that even happen with just a stingray up in the air over the protests? See, an individual device has has an IMSI number and an IMEI number. So those numbers are representations of the device. Those devices, when they ping off cell towers, are associated with locations. So that device can be mapped to a particular location. Other devices, which are also in the proximity of that location, can be mapped there, and databases can be made of where these devices connect from. Associations between those devices and the people that own their devices are made, and this is information that informs ad tracking, but can also be purchased by governments, political organizations, as well. And just to go back to that stingray example, there was a Edward Snowden revelation where the Canadian government was basically scraping up the information of people passing through their airports, and you can assume that this happens just about everywhere, really. Basically, the kind of like travel choke points where it's known that new devices will be coming into the country are an easy way to recognize foreigners. IMEI numbers are kind of region specific. So once that device is picked up at the airport and this is a known kind of foreigner, then that device is really easy to track all the way through the country for the duration of its visit. Okay, so that happens at airports. It happens. It can happen on request to telecom agencies whenever a device becomes suspicious or an individual becomes suspicious as well. And so that information can be correlated with if business documents have been filed, emails that are associated with that device, or IP addresses that are associated with the device, real addresses that are associated with the business or with the device, vehicle purchases or rentals, websites that are visited, credit cards that are used, and any type of banking data, and court records. And all that information can be used to basically create maps of human networks. And so it just becomes very easy to like pinpoint individuals based on kind of aggregation of this data and the data that's associated with a particular group. So there should be no doubt that at public gatherings, when you meet with others and your devices come into contact, that your information is just dripping off of you. So one thing to be concerned about when meeting in physical locations, now that we've kind of covered how device locations, even though people might not meet in the same location at the same time, give off breadcrumbs, but meeting together even more so. Going out to meet at a gathering, the street cameras, if there are any news crews or police camera crews or surveillance teams, are definitely ways that that more information could be gathered about you. We kind of covered geolocation data from personal devices. The other people around you, their devices and their activity may get associated with your device and with you by extension. If you take any photos at the event or other people take photos, that information could have location data associated with it, and you could be tied to that location if someone was doing an investigation on the photos that a person took. Any voice recordings at the protest or plainclothes officers in the crowd could help identify you as a person that was there. And something to consider is that like all along the route, even if you were to kind of turn off your device, along the route to any event, any gathering, any meeting with other people, there are commonly surveillance cameras, other people taking photos, that kind of thing that can kind of help people locate you at that event or that gathering. Any unique clothing in terms of physical appearance, anything that makes you kind of stand out from the crowd, those things help give you away. And all of these data points and observations are things that can disclose information about your organization, about yourself that you don't want to give away, and basically compromise you and your organization's privacy. And just keep in mind that basically all this information, it's not like someone has to go out and kind of hand comb through the internet to put things together. This information is more or less automatically being scraped and compiled into reports about you and about people in your organization at all times. And it's basically just purchased when it's needed. If, for example, your organization becomes an organization of interest, or if people in your organization become people of interest. So, yeah, just before you start out on any type of gathering, large group gathering, consider doing a risk assessment. Understand who has to be there and why, and what risk to your organization there might be to have the identities of those people becoming known, if any at all. What kind of compromise there could be to your organization if many of you were to become harassed by local law enforcement, or if someone were to gain access to multiples of your devices as opposed to just one. Yeah, this is thinking more from the perspective of law enforcement being the threat actor in this case. So you can always ask more about this and we can kind of dig into it. Device security, I would recommend using non-biometric passwords, so no fingerprint, no face password, because those can essentially just be unlocked by forcing you to press your thumb against something or putting the device up to your face. So I would recommend using a password. Encrypt your devices. On iPhones, this is a default. Your hard drive is encrypted by default. On Android, this is an option that you have to go into and turn on. Use encrypted communications. I mean, yeah, either Signal, Telegram, something like that. And also just consider when you go to meet someone, if you need to take your device with you, make sure your device isn't set to auto connect to public Wi-Fi. If you do need the internet, take your travel router with you, use a VPN, and I wouldn't recommend connecting your device directly to the local network. But realize that in a foreign country, using the telecom network, it's a similar concept to using a compromised public Wi-Fi. Uh, in some countries, the government and the telecommunications companies work hand in hand, or the telecommunications companies are state actors and have access to your traffic. Let's go into travel security specifically now. So I hope that in the first part of this presentation, you kind of got a sense of how law enforcement looks at human rights organizations, their gatherings, and what might come off as suspicious to them and things that would make you stand out. I want to go a little further into that and help you go through just a few exercises here to again kind of uh, develop a bit of that muscle. These types of kind of saying things from law enforcement's perspective. And we're going to go through just a couple exercises here and then watch a video of kind of like a first-hand account of a TSA agent and their experiences in terms of how profiling is done and how kind of people doing surveillance think about observing their surroundings. And I believe that this is going to help you understand better how to kind of uh, travel in a way that kind of will help you avoid secondary searches or any type of close contact with state or security guards that might want to get access to your personal devices or do some type of more detailed search. So this first video is going to be an exercise on understanding. Well, let's do it and we'll talk about it just afterwards. So in that exercise, you saw how having some type of pre-existing bias when observing a situation makes it difficult for you to see things that you didn't expect. And so let's think about this. When you go around, like it's kind of this phenomenon when you buy a car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere because it's kind of at the forefront of your mind. For security professionals, they're looking for certain things and they're going to see things that you kind of take for granted or don't think are noticeable. So just if so let's keep that in mind and let's look at this next video and try to look at it through the eyes of a security guard and try to use what are called kind of heuristics from a security perspective to identify things which we believe might be suspicious. And we'll go through the tools here that security guards and people in law enforcement use to evaluate kind of the physical situations in front of them. So these things are biometrics. These are like the physical, uncontrolled bodily functions of people. So like, for example, a nervous person sweating or their pupils being dilated, their hands sweating, fidgeting or having some type of nervous movements. Iconography, the types of things that people wear or logos on their luggage or on their person that give away where these people are from, who they're affiliated with. Geographics, like where is this person, and does this person kind of fit into the situation that they're in? Is that individual kind of a type of person which is typically in this location? Proxemics, is this person near people? Does it look like other people are looking at them, talking to them, interacting with them? Do they seem to be kind of an outsider to the broader group? Do they seem to be affiliated with anyone in the crowd? What type of person is this? Can we get a sense just by looking at their interactions with others? Um, Atmospherics, what's the kind of, you could use the term the vibe. Are people, do people seem to be relaxed here? Do people seem to be on edge, in a rush, relaxed? Think about the difference between people sitting on a beach versus standing in a subway station, that type of feeling. Kinesics, uh, physical movements, not the uncontrollable ones, but again, like kind of having to do with the atmospherics in a sense, but more on the individual level. How are people moving? Do they seem to be walking around quickly? Are are they struggling to carry something that they're holding? Um, do they have a limp? That kind of thing. So let's take a look at this video, try to keep in mind some of the things we just talked about, and see if we can evaluate the situation using these heuristics. Okay, I want you to apply what you just learned as you look at this scene. I've cut it up in such a way to remove the anomaly, but just look at this video and watch for the sense of baseline activity that you get. And then we'll watch through it silently, completely, coming up shortly here. So just take a look and just gauge the situation for yourself. All right, with that baseline that you've established, begin evaluating the scene now from the perspective of a security guard. Let's watch it one more time. Many people that watch this video mention the man standing at the top left of the screen by the corner of the building, somewhat isolated from everyone else, while the majority of people here seem to be in kind of pairs or groups, walking around kind of peacefully and or just kind of looking rather peaceful. The most obvious in this video is going to be the man carrying the backpack, which is obviously clearly heavy, based on the way that he's walking. And considering that there aren't many people traveling in this area, he doesn't look like some kind of DoorDash delivery guy. The backpack looks kind of like his personal backpack, and it doesn't seem that there's any real reason for someone to have such a heavy backpack in this area. Also, kind of the the focus he has as he's walking. Clearly, he has some kind of objective, whereas everyone else seems to be walking around rather casually and kind of without as serious of an aim as he does. So yeah, if you notice that man, that is definitely the person that security guards would be, or those are the things that would kind of clue a security guard into thinking, well, maybe this guy's a bit out of place. Maybe I should go talk to him. Okay, so now let's look at this video, which I like because it's a travel security agent who basically describes how he profiles people in the airport and how effective he is at it. And I just think it's an interesting thing to see from someone's perspective that actually does the work, and kind of just take that for what you will.
With airlines from over 60 different countries flying into Bangkok, clear communication is vital. Luckily, Captain A can send people to the back of the queue in several different languages.
Visa on.
But she always finds time to answer passengers' questions patiently.
Do you speak here in Bangkok? Thai. Thai. Yes. Do you speak Mandarin or Chinese? No, that's for China, Chinese.
Working under Captain A today is Captain Sarek.
Passport, please.
He makes a point of greeting passengers in their own language.
I work here for 1 year, so I just take a look at them, and I know that what is their nationality is.
Captain Sarek's always looking for new passengers to practice on.
Sometimes, if I have free time, I just learn their language.
Today he's mainly been practicing Portuguese.
What is it? What sorte?
It means good luck.
With a little help from his homemade phrasebook, he can now greet passengers in Russian,
Udashi, I mean good luck.
and Korean,
한국인 출근해요. 한국어.
Chinese,
你会讲泰语吗
and French.
French. Bonjour.
But
Now, when traveling, you definitely want to plan for interactions with security professionals. So just assume that your device is going to be searched, assume that you'll be asked questions about what you're doing, assume that you're going to end up in a secondary search. Avoid traveling with large groups, with a large number of members from your group, so that if you become detained or go through secondary search, or your devices are taken or compromised in some way, that it's not your whole operation that goes down, that some of you could still continue on to complete whatever the mission that you wanted to do, to go do the work that you wanted to do. Expect that if your property goes out of sight, it has been searched, so your stowed luggage, carry-on luggage that kind of goes out of sight for any moment. If someone takes your device, assume that it's been searched. A good thing to do, because going into a situation like this with so much preparation and some kind of concern about being searched, it can, like we kind of talked about with the heuristics earlier, kind of put you in a situation where your biometrics are kind of off. You kind of maybe feel a bit uncomfortable, which clues security people into interest into who you are and what you're doing, and probably leads to a secondary search. Also, just for your own well-being, it's good to have a kind of transition ritual where you can just kind of, either that's something that just like kind of calms you down, puts you at ease as you're traveling, like, you know, for some people it's reading a book, for another person it's looking at a picture of a loved one. It's very personal, but have that transition ritual and make it an important part of your transitions into situations like interacting potentially with security, with law enforcement, etc., so that you're more at ease, you're more comfortable, which is just generally good, but then also has the added benefit of hopefully getting you out of unnecessary searches and conversations with security guards. In interactions with law enforcement, especially in countries where you're not a citizen, you may be required to unlock your device to give access, or else entry into that country or into that region that you want to go into will not be allowed. So you don't want to compromise your overall objective and put at risk your organization's mission. So you want to be prepared for this, and you want to be able to go on to do what you have to do for your organization. So the best thing to do is really to remove anything from your device temporarily that you don't need during this period of travel. So a helpful practice here is to basically keep important documents, anything sensitive, either in cloud storage, or delete it from your device and then have someone send it to you when you get to your destination. Cloud storage obviously would be more convenient. If you have apps that have access to cloud data just for the duration of the trip, delete those. Password managers have a travel mode, some of them do. 1Password does for sure, which will basically hide away any type of secrets that you don't want to disclose to someone searching your phone. What also should be said here is that your device should have a kind of defense in depth approach, and it should be based on a risk assessment. Nowadays, given the technology that we saw earlier in this presentation regarding the device compromise and the tools that are available to governments and law enforcement agencies, Access to the device can sometimes mean total takeover of the device, installation of malware onto the device, even if the device was not unlocked. So take that into consideration. And if you believe that you might be in such a scenario that this could happen to you, then go to the more extreme route of basically creating a kind of digital alias. Use the device a few months before you travel to this high-risk location. Give it kind of a regular look and feel with some apps that you use just to talk to, like, say, friends and family, that kind of thing. And have that as your kind of your digital alias, as I said, and bring that device with you. And perhaps for communications within the country, get a device locally, something like that. If your risk assessment gives you the sense that these types of extreme measures are not necessary, then I would go with just using a password protected device with the applications that have access to your cloud resources removed, sensitive information deleted from the device, and doing your best to avoid secondary search. Just remember that as you go through the search, if you're asked to unlock your phone, that's something you will probably have to do. And so whatever is on that device, you need to be comfortable with other people seeing and realize that what the risks are with the disclosure of that information. Getting a little more specific with some of the threats to digital privacy while traveling. Airports and high traffic public areas like cafes and hotels are notorious for being targeted by hackers using malicious access points. Basically access points that look like hotel Wi-Fi or something that looks like public Wi-Fi, something called, like, in the United States, Comcast, Xfinity, or, Hilton Wi-Fi, something like that. Something that looks like a regular access point and actually will function as an access point if you connect to it, but which will sniff all of your traffic once you're connected to any other subsequent connection you make to a website or any other device. So that's one thing to be concerned with, is just the opportunistic hackers in those environments. They tend to be more frequently targeting those areas. Another one is that the government agencies themselves might have installed that type of technology in the airport to sniff traffic as well. We talked about the stingrays and the kind of telecom choke point there, being able to kind of identify devices coming into the country and downgrade your SMS protocol to sniff traffic. So in these cases, have a VPN running on your device. Better than that would be to have a travel router that you use as an access point for your devices. Have that travel router pre-installed with a VPN, and use that travel router to connect to the airport VPN. That travel router can be configured with a firewall and that VPN to prevent anyone from accessing your devices. The VPN traffic coming off of that router will be encrypted and prevent someone from reading the information that your device is sending out and receiving. Before you travel, it's important to set your device's security settings to kind of the most or the least permissive and the most secure possible. So one thing you're going to want to do is, if you have an Apple device, it's already in place, but if you have an Android, set your device encryption to on. Go to your Wi-Fi settings and ensure that your device doesn't automatically connect to known networks. There are attacks that basically take advantage of this and will spoof common known networks, and your phone will be tricked into connecting to them. I would set your phone into airplane mode as you move through the airport. If you need some type of digital documentation on your phone, just save local image copies of that information, like any type of boarding pass information or whatever information you might need to just conduct the rest of your trip without a telecom or internet connection. And have maybe some type of way of letting other people know that you've kind of entered into secondary search, or your mission might be delayed should your travel be delayed because of a secondary search, or because you've been detained, or your device gets compromised, or they take your device from you. So have some kind of backup plan, some backup communication plan, or some type of like time limited, if I don't reach out to you within this time, like, send a taxi or do this or whatever it might be. And for these types of situations in the secondary searches, I mean, you have a right to privacy. No one has to know everything about what you're doing. So as few details about what you're doing is always your right. It's very normal today for people to be kind of digital nomads, work remotely, just to be on a regular travel kind of, or to just be visiting a friend, whatever it might be. So, before you head out on your trip, like, get to know the region in a way that like a tourist would or a digital nomad would, and just be prepared to give as little detail as possible, and just say, I work remotely, I work with people in this region, and just have some kind of story that doesn't attract a lot of attention. There's no reason to like elaborate on anything in these situations, and you basically just want to get out of secondary searches as fast as possible. So once you get past the airport and you're onto your hotel or your remote work location, or wherever you are, like as you end up working within the country, keep in mind physical security, and kind of physical security is important. And here are some things to consider. I want to show you a video just of how some common physical barriers are compromised, and just a quick thing that maybe we can do to protect at least our belongings in the case that we lock away our goods and leave them out of sight for a moment. So let's just take a look at this video really quick. He's opening this door from the outside by just manipulating the lock itself with that tool. Here he's opening a door with a plastic card by just moving the lock again with that plastic card, although it has a card reader attachment to it. Here he's gonna pull the push bar on the other side by sliding that tool in through the door and engaging it from the other side. And this one's an interesting one. This door and the door behind it, this one is card reader protected. He's going to be using a can of air spray that you use to clean your keyboard with to activate the motion detector on the other side and unlock the door. The door that he goes to now has a fingerprint scanner as security for access to that room, and he uses the same method to open this door. And here's one that's probably the most relevant for travel safety. This is a hotel room. The same group of guys basically have this almost kind of a clothes hanger tool that they use to slide under the door and then engage the handle from the inside, opening the door pretty easily, as you can see. There are people that specialize in any given region for the types of doors in that particular region as locksmiths. And those people have kind of physical world hacker capabilities, if you can put it that way. Let's take a look at a product that's out there called Haven, which was developed by someone you'll probably recognize, to turn your cell phone into a kind of makeshift hotel security system. Let's take a look.
Have you ever had to leave something important behind, but wanted to keep it safe? Get Haven. Haven turns any spare Android phone into a safe room that fits in your pocket. It sounds crazy, so how does it work? Well, when you think about a smartphone today, they've got an incredible amount of surveillance equipment that is built into them. Typically 2 cameras, they've got 3 microphones, they've got barometers, accelerometers, light sensors, always on internet connection. They have the power to understand everything that's going on around them. We designed Haven as a tool for investigative journalists, human rights defenders, and people at risk. By combining the power of these sensors Imagine the thing you want to protect the most. Maybe it's personal. Maybe it's practical. Maybe it's not a thing at all. Maybe it's you.
Hey, finally, I just want to reiterate that the important thing here is to kind of keep your safety and security paramount, but also just your well-being while traveling. Ultimately, the purpose of all this is being able to get you to where you need to go to do what you need to do, and that's what Firewatch is here to help you do. If you have any questions about anything mentioned in this video, or you want more details or help with any type of risk assessment, please do reach out and we'll help you with that. Thank you very much.